What's up, everybody? Thanks again for stopping by for another edition of March 4th with Mike Bauman. I, of course, am your host, Mike Bauman. Whoever you are, wherever you're listening from, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. If you're a returning listener, I greatly appreciate your continued love and support. And if you're a brand new listener of the show, man, thank you so much for hopping aboard that pirate ship. You can follow me on Instagram at March 4th Pod. I am over there on the YouTube at March 4th Pod. The link tree with all of my stuff is in the podcast description for this episode. So that means if you made it here, then you found me somehow. And I truly appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to check out another edition of the March 4th with Mike Bauman podcast. I hope everybody's doing well, man. I'm getting excited. We've got football on the horizon. Actually, it's here. Preseason NFL football is here in the States. College football is only a couple of weeks away with like the week 0 thing they do at the end of August. High school football is getting ready to start up here in the States. So I'm a big football fan, big Detroit Lions fan, big Toledo Rockets and University of Notre Dame fan at the college level. And of course, I always pull for my beloved alma mater, Toledo Central Catholic, who is back-to-back state champs in the state of Ohio. I think in D3 now. I want to say they were Division II. For a long time, they were Division II when I was there, but I graduated, gosh, 18 years ago now, as many years as I was on this planet. When I left there and graduated, I've been out of there 18 years now. So time is a trip. But yeah, man, I'm really excited. This is an awesome time of year. Fall is upon us. It is a beautiful season here in Tennessee. I've got a vacation coming up at the end of October with my mom and my sister, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, man, there's a lot of cool stuff on the horizon, and I'm just really excited to finally take a vacation, man. I haven't taken a proper vacation in like almost 2.5 years. I've gone home to see family and stuff for the holidays, and don't get me wrong, I love that. It's great to see, friends, family. But sometimes it can get a little busy running around trying to see everybody. You know what I mean? That's the one tough thing about it. But as far as like shutting everything off and just going somewhere for a week and decompressing and being out in nature and just shutting off my mind, which is very hard for me to do. I've gotten better over the years. Still working on being concise because I can gab with the best of them, but I guess it wouldn't be good if I had a podcast and was a quiet person. Nothing against the quiet people out there. I love you too, but I think if I said less, I don't know if the pod would be doing as well as it did. I digress. But yeah, so I've got a vacay coming up, or as a holiday, as those of you overseas refer to it. We call it a vacation here in the States, and I like to shorten words and call it a vacation. But really looking forward to that, man. Getting into the mountains here in Tennessee, and it's a beautiful time of the year in the fall with the leaves changing and everything. And I've been there before a couple of times in the recent past, and it was fun. But each one of those trips was just kind of a couple of days at a time. In fact, I think the first time I went there, I drove up there on a Saturday, or I should say over there, because it's east of where I am here in Nashville. And then we came back on a Monday, and then the next year, I think we left on maybe a Thursday and came back on a Monday. We had a couple of more days. We had like 3 full days there. Um, this time it's an entire week. So I'm really looking forward to that, man, and it'll be cool. My mom's never been. She's only ever driven through it. My sister's never been. So it'll just be good, man, to have a nice kind of family vacation. We got a really cool place. And yeah, man, there's nothing like just being in nature and waking up and seeing the mountains. Like when I visited Colorado back in 2019, again, crazy how time flies. Um, I like got to a point where I'm like, man, I could see myself being out here, and then you start thinking about family and friends and everybody like there's nobody that I know personally out in Colorado, on like a really close level, I should say. And so, you start thinking about how far away could I live from people? And granted, you're a couple of plane flights away. But man, there's something about the mountains, and it's probably the Ohio boy in me, especially growing up in Northwest Ohio where it's really, really flat. Even when I came down here to Tennessee, I was like, "Oh my God, look at the hills!" So seeing the Rockies and spending some time and the Rockies, and being the big music fan and metalhead that I am, going to Red Rocks. Didn't see a show, but got a chance to go there and visit, and it's just so gnarly and cool to me how that formation just naturally comes out of the earth. And obviously they put like the benches or bleachers, whatever you want to call it, in there. But man, it was cool to go there and go to Garden of the Gods, and it's beautiful out in Colorado. And I think the people there they're used to the cold and the snow. So I feel like they handle it better than where I live now. You get snow in Nashville and it's like crazy town. But yeah, man, so a lot of fun stuff on the horizon. I'm really excited, and I'm really excited about the direction the podcast is heading in. Not to toot my own horn, but the last time I looked at kind of like the year to date numbers and stuff, and there's been, I think, downloads from something close to 20, 25 different countries halfway through the year. So that's still a trip to me, man, that people in other parts of the world know my name and are listening to the show. This week's this week's guest, say that three times fast. I did have my coffee today. They're based in Australia, so it's cool to kind of spread my wings a little bit, and in terms of not having listeners just in the States. And it's been like that for a few years, but it still blows my mind that halfway through the year there's already been people who have listened from like 20, 25 different countries, man. So thank you to all of you who like and subscribe and tell a friend to tell a friend and share these conversations. There's been a lot of perseverance, a lot of facing fears and overcoming and challenges, I think, for all of us, globally in the last 4 years, man, with COVID and stuff that I've shared before here on a surface level, because I don't air out my personal life publicly. But just challenges that I've gone through over the last few years that have really kind of changed me as a person. And so in a lot of ways, this show has kind of mimicked and imitated real life for me. What's that old quote, like art imitating life? And it really has been the story in terms of perseverance and moving forward with my life, man. So I really hope that you guys continue to enjoy these conversations and spread the word, help this puppy grow so we can get the word out on great artists, and get their music and their message out to people. And speaking, getting the word out about great artists and getting their music and message out to people, this week's guest was brought to me by the awesome Johnny Zirkle. Johnny has been a big supporter of the show. Thank you so much, Johnny. Also a soon-to-be father, so congrats again to you and your wife, Johnny. But this week's guest, man, is a guy who's got ties to Georgia here in the States, but he and the band that he's been a part of for a long time, most of the band anyway, based in Australia. He is none other than Mark from the band Royal Chant. They were formed back in '09, and they've been some busy dudes, man. They've cranked out 9 albums, if I'm not mistaken, over a 15-year period since their inception, and their 10th studio LP, Be Your Own Boss, is due to all of y'all's eardrums this September. And on this one, we had a great conversation just about how Mark got into music, living in Australia, building the band over the years, and kind of getting to a tipping point and kind of a rejuvenation with the band and their sound. Some of my faves, and listening to their catalog, gearing up for this conversation with Mark, are I Am a Wolf, You Are the Moon. Their recent single, Blunt Force Drama, which we talk about, was inspired in part by Australian news headlines. And we get into that. Jet Fighter, I love, Spectrogram, The Daily Exchange, Rhetorical, Homecoming Queen. There's so many great ones in their catalog over the years, man. But again, when you think about that, 9 records in a 15-year period, the 10th one is due this September. And it was just fun talking to him, man. It's always cool when you meet people who love music and it's not just like a commodity to them. And those of you who know me know how much, that was weird. Again, hashtag coffee. Those of you who know me know how much I love music. There you go, Mikey. And so it's cool whenever I meet people where it's really been a central force in their life. And again, there's perseverance and overcoming involved in this conversation with Mark. So without further ado, I'm going to shut my big yapper and give you guys my conversation with Mark from Royal Chant. Here it is. Alrighty. Well, Mark, thank you so much again for your time, man. I really appreciate it. And It's especially you being halfway across the world and all the emails and stuff and your patience, dude. Thank you so much for taking the time to join the show, man.
Not at all, not at all. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, just as a place to start, dude, getting a chance to check out your music's been a lot of fun. I love like there's different sounds. There's elements of like 90s that I grew up with in there. And even looking at your influences, everybody from like Bob Dylan to Michael Stipe. So it's been cool to check out y'all's catalog getting ready for this. But yeah, as a place I usually like to start with people, man, is just what was the bug that bit you with music? What do you recall your earliest memory with it?
Yeah, like earliest memory of music, probably rolling around on the ground with a tennis racket pretending to play guitar. I think that was just growing up. I remember my parents, I was always, yeah, pretending to play guitar, growing up in that MTV generation of that smack dab in the middle of the 80s. It was just constantly on. It wasn't necessarily good music, but it was music. And yeah, just it always was always latching onto music, even when I couldn't play it. My parents bought me a guitar, like a little nylon classical guitar, when I was in kindergarten or first grade. Signed me up for some lessons, but that was a non-starter. And I realize now I was literally too young to teach. You can't, I'm just a little cross-eyed kid who whatever. So yeah, so it was always just music really piquing that interest. And it wasn't until later when I picked up music, I would say properly, that it started to get channeled. And then really my first instrument was and is drums. Like that's the majority of my work is spent playing drums. But then fused with, I guess, really literature and wanting to be really into songwriting. That's where it all kind of came to a collision. So yeah, just music early on, straight up. And then really the catalyst would straight up be Bob Dylan. Like the first time I heard Like a Rolling Stone, that was it, man. I loved bands before that moment. I was really into REM, kind of like in those early teenage years. I was almost a little bit too young to fully appreciate Nirvana and all those bands. Literally, they were kind of a year above me. So I was sort of paddling around in these, I don't know, finding my way. But yeah, Bob Dylan was the lightning bolt, so to speak.
So you mentioned going from like REM to Bob Dylan. Was it somebody who introduced you to it, or how did you come
No,
upon
it
the Bob
was
Dylan?
the Bob Dylan was, I don't know if you remember back in the day. So we, well, eventually we'll kind of piece together all the bits and pieces of my life, but we lived in a log cabin, even though it wasn't out in the mountains or anything. It was like literally a log cabin and then right next door to a subdivision. It was just a crazy little happenstance. We didn't have cable TV or anything. So all we had was PBS. And they were showing one of those history of rock and roll documentaries. I'm just watching it, and all of a sudden, bam, they play Like a Rolling Stone. And I was kind of lying down on the couch, and it was almost like from a movie, you just like, what is this? So yeah, like basically I could thank PBS for introducing me literally to that song. And then from there, I was able to just kind of navigate on my own. So I didn't have heaps of friends or any older siblings or older people that could guide me. So a lot of wandering in the wilderness and just finding and stumbling over random things.
And then you mentioned as you got older, Mark, you started to take it more seriously. When, like, what age were you really getting into like drums, guitar, and songwriting?
I'd say it kind of started at 16, 17. It all came to a collision. I taught myself guitar because I knew a bit of music theory, which means if you can kind of figure out how chords work, you can teach yourself guitar just enough to get by. I mean, just whatever, just writing songs, writing songs. Um, so from 17 onward, I'd say I was serious about drums probably from 14 onward. So there was kind of these two competing streams, Mark the drummer, Mark the songwriter, and they were mostly fairly separate. They didn't really collide in any way, shape, or form. And it's still kind of that way, because it's very hard to introduce yourself to someone and have two jobs. Like, hi, I'm Mark the electrician. By the way, I'm also a carpenter. You're like, no, just so you kind of, what is that? Code switching, as it were. When I'm amongst that crowd, this is how they know me. When I'm amongst that, that's how they know me. But yeah, just writing songs, writing songs, writing songs. The Beatles were always a presence, and just really attached to melody, and just those things that are undeniable, and those earworms, and just a real quick aside, like regarding Bob Dylan, but he's such an underrated melodicist, I guess I would say. I mean, of course, everyone focuses on his voice and things like that, which I never really heard. If when they all do the yeah, I didn't really hear that. I just was in love with those sheets of sound. It was of just those words, those just endless words. Um, and I was actually almost going to meant to talk to you about that. Like now in retrospect, I've sort of wonder like some of that self-indulgence, like that endless verbiage just keeps going and going. I still love it, but I understand why other people wouldn't. They just want to like, all right, let's get to the point, Bob. Where are we going with this? So
Yeah, and I think people, it's funny how, people kind of pick and choose what to despise over time. And I think inevitably, man, whether it's like sports, music, actors, and I don't know if this happens in Australia, but it definitely happens in the States where we build people up almost seemingly to like tear them down or just wait for that first slip up or whatever. And but it's funny, I've noticed in music how there are certain artists that are really like they're in high regard, and
mm,
almost like anything they do, nobody like it doesn't matter. Like they're just it's praise, 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 praise. But then there's people where it's like, like the certain singers, they'll pick on their voice, and I'm like, well, this guy kind of does the same thing. His cadence isn't too far off from that guy, but you're picking on that guy and you're not picking on that guy. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just because Bob Dylan was so universally like that music, whether it's just like United States Americana or yourself being in Australia, like it was global that inevitably there's going to be people that are going to try to pick it apart, but like you said, I mean his influence, and whether people want to pick apart just hey, is it self-indulgent, is it this or it's that, like I don't know, man. I think it's funny how in music it like I said, at least here in the States, there's certain artists that get picked on. And I mean, he's fine, right? I'm sure he doesn't care. But it is weird how we do that in music. I mean, even as I've gotten older, and I've mentioned this on a few shows recently, like I at one point I feel like I was kind of a music snob because I kind of came from metal
mm.
and rock and roll, and I didn't really grow up with country. And then when I moved here, obviously it was everywhere in Nashville, and I was like, well, let me see what this is about. And somebody told me about shout out to Johnny was his name. He used to work at the bank that I got set up at when I was here, and we were kind of similar aged. And I like talking with people, obviously, and learning about them. And we started talking about music and how he ended up in Nashville. And he told me about Chris Stapleton, and that was when the Traveler album had come out when I moved here in 2015. And I listened to that record, man, and I was like, damn, this is good. I'm like, I can't, I'm like, this guy's got kind of like a soulful, bluesy kind of thing going on. Like, I hate making comparisons, but there's a little bit of an Allman Brothers vibe in there, and he's a really good guitar player, and the band is really good. I'm like, I can't hate on this. I don't, why am I hating on country? And even within metal, there's all the subgenres, and I always hate the infighting with that. So anyway, I'm kind of going on a rant, but yeah,
It's
when you
good.
said that about Bob Dylan, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's just something about humans sometimes, the worst of us, we want to pick stuff apart for some reason.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. I get it. And I guess that's it. Like they don't and the artists, they don't really care. They just keep doing their own thing. I mean, and basically, some of them, they basically become their own genre. So we talk about that with some of my students when we get to David Bowie comes up fairly frequently, and I try to at least give them some context. It's like because Bowie's genre is Bowie. He's like if you've got a one word name, I guess that's sort of it. It's like Dylan, Bowie, Prince, just icons. But yeah, so it was always. just that what was I trying to think of? It was like I was really in that shadow for quite a while, a number of years, trying to hit that perfect song. Really, we talk about like you're in Nashville and all the different scenes that are there. That log house that was in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. So my first real musical nucleus was the singer-songwriter scene. I know they in Nashville they have what is it, the Bluebird? Is that right? The Bluebird. So we had Eddie's Attic in Decatur, Georgia, and I would notice on the tour posters that there was a lot of crossover. Obviously, a lot of writers that are writing for country people also have their own little side careers where they're their own solo performers. So growing up in that was my first real musical hub, was trying to get into that singer-songwriter vibe. And you kind of ride that for a while, and then you find out you don't really fit in. Also, this was sort of like the beginning of Dave Matthews Band and then John Mayer. All the young guys were doing, cool, really cool stuff. But I just sounded like a young kid trying to sound like an old man. What do you? So it was really, a lot of reflection, and what's that saying, like we try on a bunch of different masks and the last one we try on is our own. So that was definitely a phase and a period. I'm just going on to the next thing, as it were.
Yeah, because Royal Chant was '09, right? Is when you guys got established, right around that time.
Yeah. So when I kind of gave up the solo stuff, that would have been around 2001, two or three, kind of fading out. Started a band in Atlanta called Sick Boy. And then when I left and we kind of did okay in a weird way. We got some really lucky little breaks in that minor league college level stuff. When I moved to Australia, I kept that name, but in Australia, they use the word sick completely different in America. I was trying to go for something, yeah, kind of fragile, a bit wounded. In Australia, they use sick, mate. That's fully sick. So it's very bro-tastic, surf skate culture. And then by that time, there were heaps of bands called Sick Boy. I think you can go on Spotify now and there's like at least 30. So I can't even, I can find our old Sick Boy records, but you have to know what you're looking for. So we started reaching out, looking for management and things like that. And he's like, yeah, you need a new name. And so hit on Royal Chant. But so the early Royal Chant stuff kind of some of those were Sick Boy songs. And that's when we, I guess, started the transition. And yeah, I guess that's the journey I'm still on, so to speak.
Well, listen to y'all's catalog, man. Like even today, I wrote down the songs that I really enjoyed a lot, and they kind of span a little bit. So like, I mean, the latest one is awesome, Blunt Force Drama, but I also love I Am a Wolf, You Are the Moon, Jet Fighter, Spectrograph. I know that's a new one, but the Daily Exchange, Rhetorical Homecoming Queen, I really like. That's such an awesome title for a song too. And then Sowing Doubt and Magnetic Fields. I believe that was the one where you had like the nature intro, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, on that one. And it's cool because there's been like there were songs that had more kind of like electronic type of vibes, and then there was one I'm trying to remember the one where the harmonica's really present in the song too. Um, gosh, but yeah, man, like I like the span of sounds that you guys have, and again, I feel like maybe the common thread, correct me if I'm wrong, is like that, like alternative indie rock, for lack of a better way to say it. I hate pigeonholing stuff,
No, it's fine. We need
but
to.
but
It
being a
helps.
kid, but being a kid in the '90s, man, like so my big brother's into metal and was really into Metallica and Guns N' Roses and stuff. He was like in '96, he was like 14. Yeah, I was 8. So at that time. So um I kind of grew up in sort of like the new metal pop
Mm.
punk were like the two biggest, which is funny because now that's all coming back now. But
It
like
is.
99, 2000, like the TRL kind of era with Carson Daly and all that. but all that to say, I really love 90s alternative, man. Like Pearl Jam is one of my favorite bands ever. And even the stuff that wasn't in that, but kind of in the periphery, I guess you could say, amongst like early 90s, where you had like REM, Smashing Pumpkins, then later on, like you said, you had Dave Matthews and all that stuff. But anyway, so yeah, those were the ones that I wanted to write down because I listened to those ones multiple times. But 9 albums in 15 years, man, that's a lot of productivity. What's this path been like just over these last 15 years, cranking out the songs? And I know there's been some lineup changes and stuff, but like I said, kudos, man, because I think you guys have like a good breadth of sound, but I think for anybody who loves the 90s alternative stuff, and just like good songwriting, I think they'll dig you guys, man, if they're not aware.
Oh man, that's cool. First off, thank you for like even knowing any of the songs. It's nothing like you do a radio interview and they're like, "So, tell us about your new single." But you can tell they don't know anything, which is fine because I understand radio presenters are, yeah, man, they don't have time to do a deep dive on your back catalog. Look, so the simplest way, like I would say the Royal Chant path. Um, so also, so much of it revolves around Australia in general and the way the country itself. I mean, it's a big country with a small population. That fact alone influences and affects every part of your daily existence. But as an artist, um, it creates some unique challenges. We have a very concentrated media, which is fine. I mean, so there's literally one radio station if you're in the independent world that you're trying to get on, and you may be aware of it. It's called Triple J. I don't know if that ever um, uh, cracks the U.S. consciousness, but so we started off as like yet another Triple J band. We were four young white guys with kind of the longish hair and a bit of a look, and kind of basically we would be hitting those kind of the end of the indie guitar band era. So the music directors like, all right, yeah, these boys will do. We had a good crack at it, make some music videos, get a bit of money, work with some cool producers and things like that. And it was a very stereotypical output and projection. Play some festivals, get some supports. It's great, it's great, it's great. It actually didn't amount to much. At the end of the day, we probably had about 50 fans tops, like true fans. And so you can't really use that to launch anything on your own. So it's kind of like you're getting ready to ramp up and you go and you see how far it can take you. And it turns out we didn't get very far. Not really. There were like a dime a dozen. You know what I mean? Like especially guitar bands. So this is where most bands will quit. We lost our management, we lost our booking agency, because we we were just getting diminishing returns. But we just kept playing shows, kept writing, kept recording, just kind of were too dumb to quit, if that sort of makes sense, or at least I was anyway. And I guess that's how you think, like, so all the apparatus falls off, and then you could call yourself an indie band, but that was by sound. Now you're an independent band by work ethic and philosophy. And so I guess the real transition started happening when James Carthew joined the band. Um, and I connect with him on a lot of levels, personally, emotionally. He's just a great guy. And even artistically, he was always pushing us to be more avant-garde and explore things. And so that's where we kind of dropped that idea. Well, plus we're getting older. You can't play that young man's game. So you have to figure out, how can I make music that will grow with me? Um, and so that's sort of the path we're on now. I'd say probably since 2013, and then really 2015, as we just kind of, man, just try to write the best song you can, record however you can, and release it. And even the people that we look up to, that starts changing. So instead of trying to emulate certain bands, I guess I'm not going to do a great job of explaining this, but that's why Guided by Voices has been such a inspiration because they just keep producing things. They just keep, you know what, next song, next record, keep going, play some shows. So that's probably the Royal Chant path in a nutshell, is that we just kept going when we realistically anyone would have quit. Straight up, like as good business advice, they would say, stop what you're doing right now. So
Well, and thank you for sharing that because yeah, that's nothing to sneeze at, man. I mean, nine records in 15 years is some serious output. Like one of my favorite bands here in the States, and they've played all over, is Seven Dust, and their catalog, like they go back to like 97, I think their first record came out. So I mean, to make that kind of music, and I don't think people realize too when they see either like a music video or they listen to a song, like just that one song, how many takes it took, or how many times the band practiced it, and then beyond jamming it and demoing it, then it's like recording it and putting it to tape and like, okay, let me do this again, so I kudos to you guys, man, but I think that even ties in with the theme of the show of March 4th, like perseverance and moving forward. And there's, I even along this path, too, like me doing this podcast, sometimes I'll find myself comparing myself to like these giant shows of people who are like famous, or like whether they were comedians and then they started a podcast, or they were movie stars. And I'm like, I'm a regular dude who works in healthcare, and I went to school for journalism, and I have a background doing it, professionally, but on a small level. I'm like, but I shouldn't be comparing myself to that. I got to have the best conversations possible, hopefully put people on to artists that they enjoy, or conversations that they like. But I think y'all's story really does fit into the theme of the show of perseverance and moving forward, and March 4th, what the whole name is about, because there's a lot of people who quit, man, before that thing happens that maybe takes them to another level, or it's a creative breakthrough. And so I'm glad that you didn't stop, for real, man. I mean, I love music, and I'm sure you can relate as somebody who makes music. Like there's when you meet people who really love music, it's kind of like that Spider-Man meme where it's like, oh, you too, you know what I mean? Where it's more than just a commodity, or it's more than just something to play in the background where you're like, no, I love this. I love going to shows. I love buying vinyl or buying the shirts. So I'm glad that you guys are continuing to do it. And again, some of the latest songs I really dig. The record from 22, anyways, and also sorry, right? Like that one is like that whole record is just a jam, and it's a good vibe, man. So I'm glad, long way of me saying I'm glad you guys didn't quit, dude, because
no,
so many
no, no,
people,
thanks.
they give up before they should, man.
Well, look, it was really overall it was healthy, even and just very humbling because you have to remember like why are we doing this? Why like and you have to like I guess that's it. Like, can you do this without the accoutrement of whether it's bigger shows or radio play or that all that external validation is really intoxicating. There are, and this is really sad because now I'm freaking old, and every band we play with is, man, I'm 20 years older than them, and so I'm sort of getting into this grandpa role. And just watching bands that have been doing it for like 1 year or 4 years or whatever, and they're doing these roller coasters because that validation is intoxicating and addictive. And will you still do this even when that's gone? Because it is. I mean, it's a cliche, but peaks and valleys, 100% peaks and valleys. And unfortunately, there isn't enough, I guess, emotional support or just support in general for helping kids navigate these challenges. I'm sorry, I'm calling them kids, even though they're in their 20s. So it's not necessarily material support and helping them avoid those valleys, but it's just coping with them. It's like, hey man, yeah, I know yesterday or last month you were here, now you're here. You're still making good tunes. And that's what a lot of Aussie bands struggle with, us included. Like I said, it's a limited market, and you think, oh, if you like that song, you're gonna love this song. Like, nah, mate, we're good. You're like, what? And then yeah, a lot of doubt, so much panic and reflection, and just you have to figure out what you're worth. Like, I mean, self-worth. Forget the monetary value. And yeah, it's a cliche, and so much of it is probably grounded in delusion, or it could be you could view it through that prism. So you just humble yourself and just keep going. Don't worry about that. I mean, really, that's just age old sage advice. What can you control? The only thing I can really control is writing a song and playing a show. That's about it. The rest is out of my hands.
Hell yeah, man. And even and you mentioned too, like you or a little bit earlier, you mentioned guys like Bowie or Prince, kind of like these one name guys, and like I love both of those artists. Under Pressure, that song with Freddie Mercury. I mean, that's kind of like a family song for us, like long story short, but I believe it was when my grandpa turned, I don't know if it was a 4th of July party or if it was like his 80th birthday. It might have been a 4th of July party. But that song came on and my grandpa had a great sense of humor and he started like dancing with a hot dog in the kitchen. And then when he passed, and I know some people have different beliefs about this, but I always felt like when I had like a tough time or I was going through something, I'm talking on like terrestrial radio, like you know what I mean? So the chances, and granted, it is a very popular song, right? So if you're listening to a station that plays like 80s music or hits of the last 40 years or whatever, there's a good chance it'll come on, but it's not a song that's like I'm trying to think of like really I mean it was a hit, but it wasn't there's other songs that like I would say even like a Purple Rain from Prince or like a Michael Jackson Thriller, right? That's
Yeah,
like
yeah, I get you.
it's more likely that like maybe that'll come on. And I swear, man, like anytime I would have like a low moment or I was going through something or that song would come on, man. Like it was just weird. And I always felt like that was like my grandpa speaking to me. But the point I'm trying to make with a guy like Bowie, and you kind of talked about it too already, is like these guys weren't afraid to experiment, man. Like they did whatever they want to do. Bowie had like multiple personalities and eras like in his music. And and I think what concerns me a little bit, Mark, about where music is today, especially with all these algorithms and sort of these tastemakers and the gatekeepers that and the arbiters that kind of exist, it's like I worry that bands or artists, or like you said, younger artists in their 20s, that are just starting out, that they might try to catch a wave versus just like writing from their heart. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Because even if something might sound weird to somebody, like if it means something to you, there's going to be
Mm,
other people that think it's cool too. You know what I mean? So I just hope we don't get to a place, especially with all the AI and stuff, and that's a whole other conversation, right? But where people don't start making music that's like streamlined into these algorithms or what they see somebody else doing something and think is cool versus just like make what you love to make. I mean, because whether it's Bowie or whether it's Queen or whether it's Prince or REM or even Pearl Jam, like they did some records that, critically people were like, what is this? Because the critics just want you to make verses or 10 every time. They don't they
yeah.
don't they don't want you to make a record like Yield, something that's a little bit different. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't even know if there's a question in that other than yeah, I hope people make the music they want to make. That's the most important thing.
Look, ultimately, if especially if an artist is playing the long game, making the album or song or album, whatever, the art that they need to make is good for them in the long run. And that's why there's something to be said for just write, record, release, move on to the next one. There's a little bit of the Bob Dylan mentality, the Miles Davis, even the Guided by Voices, just next one, next one, next one. Yeah, you can shortchange yourself sometimes. You might there might be something really amazing in there that you could have spent a little more time on and I guess developed it or even just promoted it better. As any When I was really into the Dylan phase, you there'd be some craptastic albums, and then you'd hear something amazing, and like what? So I guess that is part of and maybe this is a bit old school, but artists used to really punish their fans at times. Says, but something that was really I've been thinking about, and it's is the lack of, obviously there's always going to be popular and then the alternative. And one thing that sort of happened within the, I was thinking of like the analogy of ecosystems. Um, and a lot of the musical ecosystems are gone. So if, let's back and we'll make an easy comparison. If you were a major label band or, a big band, that was their ecosystem, the Rolling Stones, the terrestrial radio or the big terrestrial radio. But there were little sub ecosystems, college radio and college press and smaller venues. Those smaller ecosystems are gone. So, you're talking about like independent artists. There, we used to have our own little playgrounds where you could play, like the kiddie pool, go play over there. It was still self-sufficient. And that's what we're really finding. And it's almost, I guess it's another metaphor, is that the middle class of music and arts is gone. You're either crushing it or you're nothing. And it's really sad. And it's sort of, this is particular to Australia. I know I've seen it in the US as well, but it's sort of like a not even a well-kept secret anymore, but a lot of heritage bands, that were making hits in the 90s and 2000s, they're not doing very well. You think you'd have like, right, we're not going to sell out 5,000 seat arenas, but we can still play a 1,000 or 500 cap room. No, they can't. And so there's some really ugly, and just there's a little bit of shame involved with it, that these are people that have careers longer than mine by a long shot. And they're really, if you look at what they're worth, it'd be about $500. And that is some sad, sad realities that we're looking at from a artistic and economic collision point. So yeah, that's something that really, with the streamlining of streaming, as it were, it's just eradicated a lot of the smaller ecosystems that we were relying on. So yes, long story short, hard agree. And
Well, and one thing I wanted to pivot back to, and thank you again so much, dude, for your time, is you mentioned kind of that tipping point for you guys where it's like, hey, we can either pack it in or we can keep going. And James was a big part of that. Um, can you kind of speak on that time and that connection that, like you said, you connect with them on a lot of levels, but musically where it felt like a rejuvenation and sort of over this last decade or so with what you guys have been putting out, and even kind of tying it into the latest release, Blunt Force Drama, which I think turned out really well, and I'm looking forward to the full record that's going to be coming out in September. Um, Ironically, be your own boss, kind of what we're talking about, just making the music that you like to make. But what was it about just connecting with him, man, and what sounds like just a musical synergy that's really kind of been a rejuvenation over the last decade?
so look, it's sort of because so I moved straight to Australia and to Port Macquarie. This is the only place I've lived in Australia. And like a lot of small towns, and you might recognize this, when you're from a small town, you can't exactly audition band members. You have to, all right, you're the drummer because you're the only one in town. So I sort of made a band with what was available, and they were all fine. They were lovely. Like we still talk and whatnot, but it was probably not the band that artistically I would have necessarily chosen, maybe. So long story short, we start cycling through band members almost from the get-go. And we saw James playing bass in a band. And I was like, yeah, that's the way he was just playing and in flowing with the music, sort of an undercurrent of what we do is the songs. When it comes to a live performance, the songs are just a blueprint. I mean, we're not going to be free jazzing it up there, but the song is the song. What do you want to do? Where is this going to go? So he brought with him a sense of spontaneity, just a similar like I guess a closer artistic philosophy of embracing the avant-garde or the anarchy or the whatever that lovely collision is between punk rock and free jazz. And really was always spurring us to spurring me anyway to just indulge in maybe in some of those excesses. Whereas I'm always a fan of distortion in the Sonic Youth sense, where if I would want like say 5 seconds of distortion, he would probably advocate for 5 minutes. So really pushing me in that direction. Obviously, his love of electronics as well. He's very much a robot guy. And you know, he spends his time programming, I don't know what. Um, and just I guess that kinship. Also, like finding a literary band member as well. That was just a different level of conversation. Um, so, but then keeping things in, still having that blue collar work ethic and being polite. So we're trying to fuse a lot of these disparate elements and to create the perfect, I guess, highbrow yet blue collar poetic garage band. And so he just tapped into all that.
See, we just found a new playlist, Poetic Garage Rock. That's got to be a
There
new
we go.
Spotify, you know. Well, but on that point, and thanks for sharing that, Mark. So literary, is there anybody who creatively from just a writer perspective has influenced your work, like somebody outside of the music realm, but just as far as like whether it's fiction or nonfiction that you find yourself it inspires your music?
Look, the first one, I just shout out to my 11th grade English teacher for introducing us to the Romantic poets. So John Keats, that was like the first one where really start borrowing an identity. So the romantic poets in general, right, were very much aligning with that Bob Dylan explosion, just this hyperverbal nature. Um, the idea of spinning, like creating things out of words and just mosaics. Look, pretty much anything fiction. I'm trying to think of very specific authors, and now, like, of course, I'll be drawing a blank. Um, this'll sound I'm sort of a habitual reader. Like I'm reading stuff all the time. A lot of it is just garbage words, just journalism, just consuming stuff to keep my mind occupied. Trying to think, what was the last? No, this is a nonfiction book right here. But yes, any authors? Okay, why am I drawing a blank? Oh, okay, this will sort of help. When I moved to Australia, I really made a very conscientious decision to explore Australian culture. And that meant listening to Australian bands, reading Australian writers. And I tried to follow Australian sports. Like nobody embraces a culture like a recent immigrant. You know, like I'm just, yay, Australia. So the sports thing didn't really last. But as far as the Aussie authors, like some of the ones that have been coming up, Melissa Lukashenko, there's just some really, really good stuff happening right now. So long story short, anything with words. And then a lot of the I was a dual degree in university. So music performance and English literature. And my modern British literature classes were just amazing as far as just keeping that just like, wow, what can we do with words? Sorry, it's a bit rambling and non-specific, but I feel like if I start listing authors, then I'm going to get mad that I'm going to forget some. Um, the Americans, Don DeLillo, Paul Auster. Yeah, I better stop because it'll sound it'll sound terrible. But
No,
yeah,
it's okay. I sprung that one on you. I didn't prepare you for it. Like and that happened to me one of the last podcasts I did too, where I had a couple of really good dudes on. Shout out Forever May Fall. They're a great band in North Carolina here in the States. And I was asking them what some of their favorite album artwork is because I've recently started collecting vinyl. I don't even have a record player yet, but I'm starting to collect the stuff that I love on vinyl and I've gotten some cool stuff. So I was like, off the dome, what's like your three favorite album artwork, you know? And then they asked me that, and I was just like you said, blank slate. I was like, and then I picked out the few that hit me, but yeah, man, there's and that's one thing I love about music too, right? Because there's there's people that write songs that are really really draw on personal experience, and then there's ones that are more abstract, or then there's right there concept albums where you're people are literally pulling from, whether it's like sci-fi or horror, especially in metal there's a lot of horror imagery and everything. um but yeah, so it's cool. That's something that I'm sheepish to admit I need to do way more of, is read, because I think it would help like my anxious mind too, instead of
Hmm.
looking at the phone and social media and all that, and just like you get in like the doom scrolling, it'd be better to actually pick up a good book and
Something
read.
Something that did occur to me is, there's this idea that, ooh, he reads a lot. Well, reading by itself is neither a vice nor a virtue. Like I said, a lot of what I read is like I still follow US politics voraciously, but I'm not getting anything from it. Like, yes, I still vote in America, but like, what am I doing? I'm just feeding some kind of dopamine addiction. So even if I'm reading quality literature or quality nonfiction, well, you're still not, you do have to choose because we all have limited time. That means I'm not in the act of creating. So, and then if you're really heavily involved in creation, you can be quite um, at least obtuse to a lot of things going on. I won't quite say ignorant. And I'm really guilty of that, of not following that much music. Mostly because I'm surrounded by music constantly and I hear myself talking all the time. Oftentimes, I'm not listening to anything. So, or I have to have designated music listening times. So there is a juggling, besides just juggling life in general. But the juggling, like how much are we going to input and how much are we going to output, because creative output takes time. So if I'm working on a song, that means I'm not listening to a song or reading a book. So yeah, that's something I've just been keenly aware of, is that just being a voracious reader doesn't in and of itself is not good nor bad. It's only if is I what am I going to do with it. But yeah, I like that idea when someone springs a question on you, like, hey, what's your favorite band? And you act like, what is a band? I have no idea.
Yeah, man. It happens every time, man. Well, yeah, and like my mom, she's a big reader, always been very into like Stephen King. I always give her crap too, because I'm like, I'll tell her about some, because I like horror movies, which is funny because they used to scare the bejesus out of me when I was a kid. I used to be freaked out, and now I'll watch movie. I'm like, oh, that new horror movie, I got to check that out. And I love comedy stuff, movies in general. Like The Goonies is my favorite movie ever. But as I've gotten older, I like horror. But I find myself, I'll talk to her about horror movies, or I'll tell her to watch something. She'll be like, "Oh my God, that was awful." I'm like, "Mom, you read Stephen King. Like he's written
Yeah.
some of the craziest." And she's like, "Well, as we were even just having this conversation recently. She was like, "Well, as he's gotten older, like he's done stuff that that isn't so like, crazy or, bloody or whatever." But anyway, no, but no, I feel you. I know I could see where you're going with that, where you're like, you don't want to come off like, oh yeah, like I'm a reader, but no, there, but it is weird how certain things have like we associate certain connotations with it. But no, I admire that because and you mentioned the political stuff, and we won't get into that because people can find that everywhere, and it'll be everywhere until November and beyond. And I'm just gonna make the sign of the cross and pray that we all end up
It's
okay.
like,
But
what this podcast needs is some hate mail. That's what we need.
but it is good just to escape into a good book, man. Whether it's fiction or nonfiction, there's so many great writers out there. And I think that but you also made a cool distinction of like, yeah, when I'm doing that, I'm not creating. Um, but yeah, there's always good sources of inspiration, and there's way better ones than social media. Even though social media is connected with me with good people like you, so it's not all bad. But well, before we wrap it up, and thanks again, Mark, so much for your time, dude. I really appreciate it. I won't keep you too much longer, but just to bring it to the new stuff, say it three times fast. Blunt Force Drama. I really enjoyed, man. Great song, and I know when I read kind of the influence of it kind of made me like, how do I say it? I'm like, wow, this stuff happens elsewhere too. You know what I mean? Like that it was inspired about, certain rugby players in Australia. which I know that's huge over there, right? Like here it's in the States, it's football and basketball and stuff,
Yeah.
baseball. I know rugby's huge in Australia, but guys not wanting to wear, jerseys that were in support of gay pride, but kind of, you kind of wanted to talk about a little bit in the song about sort of the hypocrisy of, well, you don't want to wear that jersey, but there's teams that are sponsored by gambling or alcohol companies, or there's guys that get accused of domestic violence or getting these drunken brawls and like so but people players aren't saying, well, we're not going to play when that happens, but
Mm.
because of this. um and it's just kind of like fascinating times we live in, man. But how often do you find yourself, I guess, to ask a direct question, because I'm realizing I don't do a lot of those, I just kind of rant. But how often do you find yourself in your songwriting kind of drawing on things like that happen, especially in the country that you're living in, versus kind of just doing something that's a little bit more abstract? Because I thought the song turned out great.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks. Look, I've a few. How do I start? You've been doing this a while, and very so rarely do we, when we're doing interviews and things like that, especially short form interviews, are we actually talking about art or the creative process or the writing process. A few people have kind of asked in the past, like, okay, what's this song about, or what do you? And I've always really shied away from having a direct A to B answer. I know some songwriters, they're like, my mom died of cancer, so this one's about that. Where I was like, oh, nothing wrong with that subject matter, but maybe let us figure it out. Not figure it out. It's not a puzzle to be solved. It's just, what does that song mean to you? With that said, so you're right. Normally it's a bit more abstract, and I want the meaning to reveal itself or change over time. So it's pretty rare that I'm writing something, at least that has a direct pinpoint origin. As far as that, like, oh, this makes me feel like that. Really, it started with the phrase, just that little play on words between blunt force drama, blunt force trauma. That it probably started there first, and then I applied it to a situation. Um, and that was pretty genuine. And as I'm older, I'm a music teacher, and I see that what we need, we're talking about marginalized and communities and people that have been crapped on for a long time. What they need are allies, and or kindness with a backbone. And so that maybe it was that moral failing of these people that are held up to be specimens and tough guys. That's what we need. We need, I guess, tough guys fighting for the good side, so to speak. And so, long story short, I guess that doesn't happen that often. Um, is writing, as far as writing from a very specific, concrete place, it just seemed appropriate in this case. And so now, like, I realize that we can't, like, yeah, you said we need allies, and silence is probably the worst thing. And yeah, it's just a song by an indie rock band, but I can at least relate to them. Being growing up in the South, in Atlanta, being very effeminate looking. I mean, I got called the, you know, gay quite a lot. So definitely some solidarity, and I thought that was important.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, because it all starts at home, man. Not to get too preachy, I'm 36, but I've lived long enough now, and you know, seen enough, and just, like one of my stepbrothers is gay, and one of my oldest friends, his big brother is gay and married, and they couldn't even get married in their home state and have it be recognized. They had to go somewhere else just to have their marriage be legally recognized. And my whole thing is, like, why do people I don't get why people care so much about what other people do, behind closed doors at the end of the day. And it always bothers me when people say stuff like, well, I don't agree with it. Well, it's like, well, it doesn't, whether or not you agree with it isn't really the point. Like, that's who they are. And, at the end of the day, like, they should be able to live their life and have the same rights as you. that's what I believe. I don't, as long as what somebody else does isn't harming, uh, innocent life or kids or anything like that. I really don't give a damn what anybody does. Just be cool and treat people the way you want to be treated. I wish it were that simple. But unfortunately it gets kind of crazy. I mean, even this morning, like I was reading a story here in Nashville. There's a crosswalk where, it's the colors of the rainbow for,
Oh yeah, yeah.
solidarity. And somebody drove through there and tried to kind of desecrate it a little bit. And it's just, I don't know, man. And it's weird that some of those people, and then I'll get off of it, but it's weird that some of the people who are the most intolerant consider themselves holy.
Yeah, yeah. Sure.
It's a strange, it's like, well, didn't Jesus hang out with prostitutes and
Yeah,
people with
man. Like,
leprosy, and like he kind of hung out with all of the outcasts that were kind of ostracizing. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but no, I'm glad that there's other people out there who care about solidarity, because it's important. I mean, and even why I do this podcast, I like learning from, as much as I love heavy music and stuff, I like having people on from different genres and stuff. And I'm not saying this to sound self-righteous, so I hope it doesn't come off that way to you or anybody listening, but it's like, the more you speak with people from different parts of the world or different parts of the country that you live in, or different genres, one, I think the more, been doing this long enough, that you, deep down, we all kind of want the same things.
mm.
And two, you might find common ground with somebody, and you might realize, like, hey, this person might be into different things that I'm into. They might listen to different music. They're a different race. They have a different sexual proclivity or whatever, but there's still something that you can connect on. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the whole point of humanity, is to connect with people, right? So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but I'm glad that you had the balls to write a song that, for lack of a better way to say it, that kind of, touched on something like that, because it made me like, I don't want to say happy sad, but it was like, when I read the meaning of the song, it was kind of like, it was kind of a bummer that I'm like, wow, even in Australia this crap happens too. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah. I understand exactly what you mean. Like even being in Australia, you're like, come on, man. It felt very imported, if that makes sense. It's like this isn't what we do here. And look, and then just a quick aside, part of it was the hypocrisy. It's like, look, you're being paid, like as long as you're going to enter into that business relationship, you just follow the rules, mate. If they tell you to wear a jersey, then you wear it. If you don't like it, you get in a different industry. So they were trying to have their cake and eat it too. And for that to be the hill they wanted to die on, I cannot abide by that. So
Well, I think the song turned out great, and I guess we can wrap it up on this. And thank you again so much, Mark, for your time, man. Genuinely, I appreciate it, and again, I appreciate your patience too. I know we had a lot of back and forth, and I'm really trying to get better about being more astute with getting my personal emails checked more often. So thank you so much.
not at
Um,
all.
but this is going to be the 10th LP, man. That's going to be coming out. From what I read, it's due out September. Be your own boss, without spilling any details that you don't want to spill yet about the record. What can you tell me and the listeners about this one? Because I think this is going to be the follow up, right, to Anyways, and also Sorry, that was the last one in 2022.
Correct. Yes.
And I really enjoyed that one, man. But yeah, how excited are you for this record, and kind of what was the headspace on this one?
Look, so this one, this has so we were doing like an album a year. Like once we hit that groove, we were cranking them out, and I loved that, and I got addicted to that. And then last year in the top of February, we had what they call in Australia like a microburst storm. It's basically like a really tiny hurricane or tornado, whatever, took the roof off the house, which is also where like my studio and whatnot. So we were in the middle of writing and recording this album, and that put a big damper on it because I was not homeless, but we had to live elsewhere. And so we get back in, um, and there was a real mind shift as well. And so I was forced to literally take a break. It was very hard to write when you're dealing with life, just not catastrophe, but kind of close. Um, so the album that I was making is not the album that I thought I was making is not the album it's going to be. Even just getting over that idea of like, we're not going to release an album this year. So what? Nobody's keeping track. You don't get a medal for productivity. So just getting into that headspace. So then I started to just relax and just write and write and write and write and write. Had a lot of disparate fragments. And so I had to really look at each one and feel like, okay, what do I have here? Like, does this need to be a song? Or was its use actually just as a creative fragment to spur on other productivity? So this is probably the first time, you hear about bands, they like, all right, we're going to go away for 3 months and write. And they wind up with like 30 songs and they cut it down to 10 or 15 or whatever. We normally didn't have that. I even got addicted to writing 9 songs per album. That's what I would do. And so this is the first time that I got out of that comfort zone, even, get away. So I don't need any timeline. I don't need any deadlines. I don't need anything. So, and then also trying to not repeat yourself. It is that constant pull. We want what's familiar, but we want to keep moving forward. And you'll hear it in a lot of bands, and it's not a bad thing when they hit that sweet spot and you're like, yeah, man, that's what they do so well. And maybe we should just keep doing that. Like that's kind of where I feel like we have like maybe 2 sweet spots, that melancholy kind of acoustic side, experimental, almost kind of anti-folk or whatever. And then we've got those just kind of fuzzy power pop-ish bangers, hopefully. Those are great. I will write those all day long, but you can't, and you probably shouldn't. So just experimenting, getting back to some more esoterics, almost not singer-songwriter, but just trying to stretch things a bit. So I just can't keep making the same record as much as I love that. So so and so a lot of these songs were started before the storm, and a lot of them are after, and just really trying to see what is going to reveal itself. So that's where we're at.
Well, I can't wait to hear it, man. This has been so much fun, Mark. Talking with you and learning more about, your musical journey personally, but also with Royal Chant, man. I'll get you out of here on this. I mean, with the theme of the show being perseverance and moving forward, and we've kind of talked about that within your story and the journey of the band. But as somebody who's teaching music too, man, the next generation of creators, maybe we got another, they'll be their own version of a Bowie or a Prince. Who knows? And you'll be like, yeah, I taught that kid. But what is as a guy who got to that point, like you said, where it's like, hey, we can kind of fold it up and call it a day, do something else, and you kept going and you're still making awesome music. What advice would you give out there to somebody, whether they're up, whether they're down, fair to Midland right now? Anything from your journey that you feel like might be applicable to somebody who is you know, on the cusp of either giving up or moving forward.
Look, besides the most obvious one, which is like, just reassuring them like, hey man, don't give up. Don't like, yeah. So encouraging them to persevere, that in and of itself. It's the other thing is that it might be worth, or sometimes you ask them, just asking them, what do you think? What do you think? Or asking them what they actually enjoy. Because oftentimes you'll find that they've actually forgotten that. So just getting them to strip it back a bit and just remember, okay, why were you doing this in the first place? And then what do you love? And can you keep doing this? Or even just asking them to try to reimagine or what they think they know as far as like what do they consider success. So a lot of that is just going to be like trying to give them something that's going to nudge them towards a little bit more wisdom and self-awareness. Like I said, so many of the younger ones, they're using external metrics, which, like I said, are addictive and how do I say they're dopamine triggering, and so I guess that's it. That those little baby steps to wisdom, and it's like just I guess telling them to dig deep and just find out who they are a little bit more, and yeah, That's probably it, really. And then encourage him just keep writing. That is I meant to mention it earlier, but that was always kind of the answer to everything. Next song, next song. Yeah, maybe don't look too closely. Just keep going, man. Just keep going.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate it, man. Seriously, thank you so much. Especially with us being different parts of the world. That's what's cool about doing this is being able to connect with other creators like yourself. I can't wait to hear the record. I will share the links in the podcast description, man. But for people who aren't aware of Royal Chant, let them know where they can find you.
Awesome. Wait, you want me to tell him or you're gonna tell him like where to do it? Oh, it's on me? Oh man, come on. Facebook, Royal Chant. What is it? Instagram, Royal Chant AU. Threads, Royal Chant AU. We got kicked off Twitter originally, so we are Royal Chant MP. We had to make a second account. And then you know what? Our YouTube channel is pretty good. We got a lot of videos for people trying to kill time. So yeah, pretty much Royal Chant. There's not too much else that comes up besides us, so that's really good.
All righty, dighty, there you have it. That was my conversation with Mark from Royal Chant. Make sure you go follow these guys on Instagram at Royal Chant AU. The links to all of their stuff will be in the podcast description for this episode. So just scroll down to the bottom of that podcast description, hit those links, and go follow and support Mark and Royal Chant. You will not be disappointed if you love rock and roll alternative. It'll definitely be in your wheelhouse once again. Their latest single, Blunt Force Drama, is available now wherever you get your music. And their forthcoming 10th LP is going to be hitting y'all's eardrums here very soon in September. It's called Be Your Own Boss. So, again, follow them online at Royal Chant AU. The links to all their stuff are in the description. So, run up the numbers, go check out their music. And yeah, if you love alternative rock, 90s rock, these guys will definitely be in your wheelhouse, man. So I just want to say thank you again to Mark for taking the time to do the podcast. I really appreciated the conversation, man. I know we had a lot of email back and forth a couple months ago setting this bad boy up, and I really appreciate you taking the time with me, especially being across the pond, as it were, because Australia, for those of you who aren't aware, they're several hours ahead of us here in the States for me in Tennessee, man. And Mark was really cool about, going back and forth and getting a good time and doing it. I believe it was like in the morning where he was, man. And we worked through some internet connectivity issues and thankfully everything worked out. So really appreciate the time, Mark. Can't wait to hear the full album. And yeah, man, it's just cool to see you, rejuvenated and making the music that you love to make. And I really enjoyed Blunt Force Drama. And for those of you who know me and listen to the show frequently, I don't really ever get political on here, just with the divisive nature that modern day politics kind of elicits, I feel like, and not only elicits, but I mean, it's just blatant on any social media platform or the news. So it being an election year here in the States, I mean, that's politics has never been my MO. My whole thing is it's like, hey, man, I'll extend my hand to you. I don't care, what your political affiliations are. Let's just be kind to each other. I say it every podcast, keep the faith, be kind to each other, be kind to yourself. So I really don't care what people's political affiliations are. And obviously, Blunt Force Drama, as you guys heard, was inspired by Australian news headlines. And, but to me, when it comes to, how other, consenting adults live their lives, it's none of our business. And I know people have certain religious beliefs and stuff like that tied to that. And again, if that's how you want to live your life and that's how you want to raise your kids, whatever the case may be, that is your choice, especially here in the States, we have religious freedom, right? Where I draw the line is when certain, religions or certain beliefs then become law or try to tell people how to live when it's really none of our business. And our country was founded upon the separation of church and state. So to me, if you really believe in democracy and you really believe in freedom, then you should also believe in the separation of church and state. And that, you know, again, regardless of whether you care about politics, whether you don't, and I didn't even know I was going to say all this, but again, hashtag coffee. But just kind of building on the conversation you guys heard. you know, human rights, women's rights, those things are very important to me. And I believe that true freedom means you, as long as nobody is harming any other living creatures, and again, consenting adults are, being consenting adults and not harming each other, then it's none of my business or anybody else's business what they do in their free time. And again, in the United States, we have the separation of church and state, and I believe that should be upheld. And if you really believe in freedom, you would probably think that way too. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and unfortunately, it's not the case even in places like Australia with some people. So, at the end of the day, man, my message is just be good to each other, be kind to each other. I'm not telling anybody how to live their lives. Um, but when I listened to the song and Mark and I got to that part of the conversation, part of me thought about editing it out, but I'm like, nah, man, like I stand by what I said, and I stand by what I just said to you guys here in the close of the show. Um, I believe in being good to people. And I'm the type of person, the way I was raised by my parents, that, regardless of somebody's, you know, uh, religious background or their skin color or whether they're gay, straight, bi, just be good to people. Treat people how you want to be treated, man. And I love these conversations and doing this podcast because it's very much part of who I am. I'm a very introspective person. I enjoy learning about people who come from different walks of life than me because I feel like that helps me become a more well-rounded person. Just like when you travel, when you get out of your hometown and move away, and some people don't, and I'm not, knocking them, but like what I did when I moved to Tennessee, it's a very different way of life down here compared to where I come from in Ohio. When you travel to different places and you spend some time there and you kind of, enjoy the local cuisine and meet with the locals and see how people live their lives, like there's so much of the world and even the states I haven't seen, but I was raised to just have respect for other people. And, not saying that in a self-righteous way, but I do think, being kind to other people and being respectful to other people, regardless of kind of what they look like or, how they were raised or, what they do in private. Uh, it's, I just think that, having respect for other human beings at the end of the day, like, wherever I go when I die, and I do believe in an afterlife, I don't think my creator's going to ask me about how much money I made and how much I had in the stock market and, how good I was at my job. Not that it's not important to be good at your job. It is. It's important to take your work seriously. Um, but, I think how you treat people is kind of chiefly, what it's all about at the end of the day, man. Life unfolding is really just, millions and millions of small moments at the end of the day when you look at your lifespan. So, why not, try to leave a positive ripple effect with whoever you meet and learn something new, right? Instead of staying in your box, man. And I deal with that with my fears and my anxieties as far as like, not limiting myself, not limiting my potential and, the things that I want to accomplish. And, it takes years to kind of work through, stuff that you experienced when you were younger, or just kind of the way that some of us are. Some people are less anxious, some people are more anxious, some people are less or more depressed. But you shouldn't carry shame for it. It's a matter of just kind of getting to a point in your life where you go, yeah, man, I'm worth it. I'm worthy of love. I'm worthy of good things. I'm worthy of joy. And to me, when you have an open heart and an open mind, you allow for more of those things to come in and you become a well rounded person. So, anyway, off of my soapbox, uh, be good to each other. That's what I'll say. Regardless of your politics, just be good to each other. And yeah, I'm sending up good vibes and prayers for everybody because I think it's going to be a wild couple of months here in the States with the coming election. But again, just be kind to each other. All right. That's the most important thing. So I'll leave you all with that. So once again, everybody go follow Royal Chant at Royal Chant AU on Instagram. Again, the links to all of their music will be in the podcast description for this episode. Keep a lookout for that 10th studio LP, Be Your Own Boss. Thanks again to Mark, and thanks again to all of you for listening. If you did enjoy what you heard, again, you can follow me on Instagram at March4thPod. The link tree with all of my stuff is in the podcast description for this episode as well. So if you want to, you know, hit me up, I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. Be kind, man. But yeah, thank you. If you enjoyed what you heard, this was your first time aboard the pirate ship. I hope that you subscribe, like and share, and tell a friend to tell a friend, man, because we need to spread the word about good people like Mark and Royal Chant. So, on that note, that is going to be a wrap on this week's episode. I hope that you guys have a great rest of the week. Keep the faith and be kind to one another and be kind to yourselves. From Royal Chant, courtesy of Mark, this is their single, Blunt Force Drama. Peace.